You guys missed an awesome jam session earlier.
All right, this way we can kind of see this. Let me move this over here. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to be asking you all to do is going to be an individual assignment, right? And so we'd like to see a progress pinup on Wednesday. We'd like to take your team site, so not your individual sites, right? So the site that you've been working on as a team, right? So for example, if you're all working on like the clean and green, right? You're all using Luis's site here, right? So Josue and Luis would both be using the country club site, right? You're going to take that as an image, right? Your A4 at 1 to 2000 or whatever that was, right? A black and white image, and you're going to create a matrix, right? So the first column, this column, the first column here is going to be just the site image as a black and white. So that's the only one that's going to be repeated. The next column, and I think Don will give you kind of an example of how this is done, but it's simply choosing. We just repeated this just for the sake of showing you a grid of a 4x5, right? Which we'd like for the deliverable. But so if we go across in this first row, the first thing is going to be the item that you're extracting, right? The idea or kind of the condition, right, that we're pulling from the site. So for this, there's a number of ways we could look at this. You could see this outline as just being hardscape. It could be pervious hardscapes. It could be, or sorry, impervious. It could be parking, right? There's a number of ways we could look at this singular condition. And then the rule set for this second column is going to be to extend these conditions to each one of the edges, and maybe we could say at least 2 edges, right? So Don here has done 3 edges, right? Where it becomes almost, it's not arbitrary, but it's loose. But there's a sense of like I would say rigor and a careful attention to the site condition itself to see where you're extending out these lines, right? So as Don's kind of drawing this. The next would be to take your void of this extraction, right, of the set condition, and to overlay your grid. So, right, CAR302, take your grid that you used for your base geometry, and we want you to overlay it into the extraction, right? So it's a reverse figure ground drawing where the grid would then be superimposed into your extraction, right? So this is very loose in how you're going about placing this grid, right? But there is we did this quickly, but we could still talk about the ideas of the grid within this, just even though that it was just quickly placed in. We'd probably ask you to be a little bit more careful in terms of like how the grid's lining up with certain edges, right? And how you rotate this grid could then have certain implications later on.
Grid from our individual projects?
Yes, yeah. So your individual, yep, your individual project from A3 or AR302, right? But this is on your team site, right? So your team site, but your individual grid superimposed. Okay, so that's our third column. The fourth column is then going to be superimposing within the grid figure ground as a field condition. So based on your reading, what types of field conditions can, as a diagram, can you superimpose within this figure ground drawing, whether it be axiality, the moire, the mat, right, the flocking. And these were done really quickly, like very quickly, but there's still some like kind of powerful data that we can pull from the imagery. The next, right, so we're superimposing the field condition within our existing grid. The next column would be to just have it, we're isolating just the field condition within the figure ground of the context, right? So in this scenario, we're kind of, there's a relationship between the field condition and the existing context, but within the extension of the extraction, right? So there's, as you can see, as you're diagramming, we're diagramming based on these ideas, and there's this layering, right? Of each diagram is informing the other and informing the original site, right? It's iterative in this sense, and it's more discursive, right? And then the final drawing is just the field condition that is essentially cropped by the existing figure ground context, right? So you're going to end up with a simple diagram of your field condition based on this kind of initial extraction of the site condition, right? So that's one. And then you're going to do that another 3 times, right? So a total of 4 different kind of site extractions of those conditions, and you're going to go through the same process, right? So I think honestly, the thing that's going to take the most time out of this is really understanding the reading and getting your grid to a place where you can quickly place it within the Photoshop file. But other than that, this is a lot of just like quick hard edge photoshopping snips, right? We don't want to see, I don't like, for me, I mean, this is just me personally talking, but I don't want to see kind of the soft edge masking. I would rather see something that's this hard edge kind of magazine cutout, right? Like an X-Acto knife, like it's quick. So, you know, maybe I can pass it off to Don to kind of maybe explain quickly how this is.
Okay, thanks, Tony. That was good. So yeah, we're, you know, just say extraction number 2. We're looking at extraction number 2. I just drew up real quick, just the next kind of possible kind of investigation would just be like, say the extraction site in this case would be the massing, the building massing itself, right? So above it was the investigation was the kind of the hardscape parking lot. Now it's the massings instead that are on the site. And then maybe the potential, like the potential way that you, I instead of running, in this case, I wanted maybe investigate running one of the extension lines through the field across the other ones, out to that other edge. Instead of just extending it, would be the natural direction, maybe this way. I ran it the other direction. So there's no limits here. This is meant to be loose. It's meant to loosen you guys up a little bit. And as Tony said, the process is really kind of dirt simple in a sense. It's the, I'll switch. I'm going to share my screen, so if we can jump onto Teams, so I can show you what I'm looking at in Photoshop real quick. It is simply kind of building on the last kind of set of videos. I made those 7 videos or whatever it was on masking. Here we're just doing that same thing, but in a very, very simpler and much more simple way. But we're looking at, right, just these different kind of layers. Okay, so you should be like abundantly familiar with how these work, and we're going to ask everybody to be familiar with that in this exercise. Okay, so certainly consult the videos if you haven't watched those videos, because you need to kind of get to this point to be able to cut out, essentially punch out, right? Simply, using the masking feature on Photoshop, just having your base layer and clicking this button and then removing, right? But instead of using a brush, as Tony's point, I didn't use a brush here, guys. I just used the polygon lasso tool, okay? And I went around. So say I'm gonna just real quick, just so you can see, this is just the deviation from maybe the video. Was I'm working now inside the mask. I've got now just the lasso tool, the polygon lasso tool. This guy over here. I'm gonna click. Say the investigation is on the surrounding perimeter of this space. It's this kind of porous greenscape. Say that's what now I can. I can just actually now that's the edge I want. I could punch that out with a big brush. Okay, so that's how you're going to punch things out, and then you just show layers beneath it, right? So the next kind of complex thing to do is figure out how to get this kind of grid, which by the way came out of Illustrator, right? Taking the grid that you drafted, right? The grid that you already drafted in Rhino. I generated out of Rhino these shapes so that I could fill them, okay, on 2 separate layers. That would have been I think that would have been just as fascinating in a sense, right? I do like the kind of aggressive, right? Using complementary colors. As we know, complementary colors produce the most contrast between color hues. So this is why your mind wants to go crazy when you're looking at this, but that's the kind of, right? I think that's the kind of effect we want in the Photoshop. So you have this. I simply and you can go much slower about. You can take your time with this, as Tony suggested. But when I wanted to get these objects in here, I could. What you'll want to do is place them as a link. You'll find that file. You'll say place linked. You'll find that file that I'm not sure where it is. I'm not going to spend the time right now finding it. And you're just going to place it in here. And what I would do is actually you can use it if it's too small. Like say, notice when I remove this is a series. What's happening here is a series of grids. Like because I had to do it fast. But what happened was I rotated each one separately, so they all have they're on a different kind of axis. And that produces a kind of edge condition in itself, a certain kind of, right, a kind of turn. And that can be manipulated. That should be thought about a little bit, like how that turns according to the kind of the field kind of parameters. How that turns in your project can be dictated by how you lay that grid down. Again, these are the ordering principles about how all of society has been developed. Okay, so we're doing that here. We're kind of trying to share with you some of the more radical strategies for that, like the observations of Stan Allen. So I think that's about it. Again, consult the videos. We have a few more minutes to answer any questions that you have or to discuss the text. I think that's it from me. Anything else from you guys?
So basically what you want us to do is reference the site and extract the theme or like the overall was it expression of the site and the views of like would be Stan Allen if any of the topics he discusses about with the geometry and stuff, and then
Luis, let's stop there before we get into the expression piece. The first step is not about expression at all. Actually, none of it really is expressionistic in a sense. Let's definitely read the text because we don't want to. It's true that it does read as expressive in the sense of what we've done here because largely out of expediency. We didn't, this was just done as to show you. We want you to read the text and be familiar with the concepts of like the moire, for example, right? How two grids superimposed on top of each other generate a moire effect, and how that actually generates a kind of swarm, the potential of like a swarm kind of like algorithm. This is actually highly mathematical kind of thinking. The first step, Luis, is to gain control of the edge. The extraction site would be the edges that are the field of study that you're looking at. So in the top one here, I'm just going to use this teal pen. I do like this color. Looking here, we're focusing in on this area. This is very explicit. There's no expression here. This is absolutely totally explicit. This is based on the edge condition of that parking lot. Okay, and then the next move is not expressionistic as it is a certain kind of, how should I say, intuition, where right, we can almost see where this began, right, and then how we ran extensions past it. Why did we do this? Because we want to indicate the continuity of this concept. Again, we want to reiterate that this project is about the growth of these aggregates across the entire county. So in this case, this is how the growth would potentially occur. It indicates a certain kind of connection to other possible zones. Even it's a slight abstraction, but nonetheless it provokes a certain kind of looseness and attention to, or lack of, like, say, we should say a more aggressive approach towards the generic city that we're looking at in most of Southern California. In this case, we would have to push back on Kaya's remark on the regionalism, and considering the sites that we're in, there's nothing specific to these regions. These are strip malls. These are hardscape plots in general across all the sites. Golf courses exist everywhere, etc. So we're not. This isn't like Kenneth Frampton's critical regionalism kind of necessarily. So what we're doing here is we're provoking a certain kind of encroachment, in a sense, of our housing project, right? And connectability to the other zones, and that's the ecological kind of component that I was trying to refer to earlier, is how housing necessitates other kind of living conditions, not just sleeping, right? Not just cooking and sleeping, but other things. Although it may not seem like that right now for all of us. So that's so Luis, to answer your question, what becomes more we say esoteric, if it seems like right now, should be answered in the reading, is how did we arrive at the stippling, right? That's one of the kind of clustering, the kind of flocking techniques in the book. This is just simply here as a placeholder to indicate that this is the field condition, the Stan Allen application of the field condition on top of your grid, which is also incredibly precise. The grid that you have for your footprint, for your geometry of your building, is absolutely locked in. So there is, in a sense, no expression here. This is actually almost purely math, in a sense, it could be seen as. And then the different ways to visualize it, like I think the last two panels, we could have generated 12 different kind of drawings out of this scenario. We would really encourage you to use this as a fun exercise to loosen you guys up. We're really excited about what we imagine coming out of this. It's a very easy exercise in terms of doing it as the technique. As you can see, it's just using the masking, right? Any other questions that we have? Luis, did that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah, I just need to extract more information from the readings.
Perfect. Please do so. Anyone else?
And I mean, just to reiterate, so you're isolating one individual site condition. It's a more of a myopic approach to this, right? Because we'd really like you to kind of hone in on one idea, right? And I think it's going to allow you to see the site through a more focused lens, right, to the larger concept or ideas that you're developing within your manifesto, but rather than to see them all at one time, to kind of isolate these. Mm-hmm. Right, so that could be the volumes, the hardscape, the softscape, vegetation, right? Like there's a lot. I'm just looking at this image that Don has, but each site's going to have very specific conditions that could be extracted, right? So try to exhaust them all, right, and choose the top 4.
Mm-hmm. One could be circulation alone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, guys? We want to make sure that we answer any questions you have. Yes.
Okay. You put a bunch of circles for field conditions. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Well, again, this is just a representation of the, if you want to look at right, the diagram over on the someone just added.
It's an open cluster.
This would be the open cluster condition. And there's that is like, if you read up on it, JJ, in the text. This was placed very arbitrarily, right? This is but Allen's I think Allen's analysis isn't about being arbitrary. Although I would encourage you to be more arbitrary if it means loosening you guys up a little bit.
So we're selecting from these is what you're saying.
Yeah, you're selecting once you kind of get a sense of them, and it's, I think you can use. We don't have an opinion. The instructors, you can use. I would encourage you to test, like we have extractions 1 through 4. You can use extraction 1 to test, right, twigs, for example. You could extraction 2 to test the loose grid, right, the grid that is right. The extraction 3, you could test the patchwork, right.
Got it.
If you want to make,
that makes more sense.
Okay, good. Yeah, if you want to make more than 4, do it, but show your best 4. How about that too? So if you want to make more than 4 extractions, or more, like, do 12, do 20, do 100, however many you want to do, but then just pick the best ones that you can argue for.
Got it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Yeah, Brandon.
Is there any progress that you want to see on the manifesto, or are we completely switching to the Redux?
Well, keep going on the manifesto. That's more of a case by case basis. I think I would just, I think it's pretty obvious that you guys spent a good deal of time on your manifesto. This reads as a manifesto. I think you have a certain kind of you're following a certain kind of historical trajectory in terms of how manifestos are written. The format itself is actually a design element. You've actually designed it, the layout itself. So you guys are amongst kind of, I would vote that if you want to take a pass, I haven't read it, but if you want to take another pass at editing it, then go through. I mean, for everybody, editing should be like 5 times, no, at least. Like it should take a lot of iterations to get to where you want. But I felt like, based on what Christian read, that there was a lot of clarity in this. So for some of you, it's more, yeah, you can table this and focus more on the this new project. Others, yes, please do yourself a favor and start to get more, like, a little bit more precise in your language, a little bit more subversive, or whatever word we want to use, to a little bit more provocative, you know. If you need any, and to do that, you have to read the case studies that we provided.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So when you said extract the site condition, you said by hardscape, landscape, and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like in the case of the golf courses, it will be just mostly like the hardscape, like the condition of where the trees are and stuff like that.
Yeah. The golf course offers a more, maybe a lot like a more subtle conditions, where you could introduce even altitude, like ideas of topography in a sense, like a certain everything at a certain level.
Okay.
Right. Or you have the sand traps, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that too.
Putting greens, fairways.
Putting greens, and
Can also be like the direction of how like the grass has a pattern sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you could follow. Yeah, how about that? Extract the pattern of the direction of the lawnmower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we want you guys to have. Well, this was fun to us. I don't know. It's maybe not be fun to everybody, but we're going to be excited about the imagery that's produced. You guys have any other questions?
I think this was excellent. Also, great questions about this. I think maybe one piece we can clarify here too is that maybe for Wednesday is a progress pinup. I'd like to see as many like tries and stabs at this as possible, as a way of really providing some quality feedback, so we get to a Friday where we have refined work and launch into the next project. So I know this might have been a bit of at least for me, this was a rough ride in terms of a studio, but this is this is why we engage in this. One is it's not a linear process. We have to gauge it based on the kind of feedback and comments and questions we get. And we're perfectly happy to do this. So this is not a rejection on the efforts that went in before, but I think we're retooling to perhaps get at a more open-ended discussion or open-ended speculation of what the future entails. So yeah. Few words left in me in this one.
Yeah, and so, maybe for Wednesday, like everyone kind of maybe clear off your desks, at least for my studio, like, and then place, whatever progress work you have, nice and neat and tidy in a grid, just your images, right? Like, it could be keep your team work board up over here, because I think us as instructors need to have this as an archive, but your individual kind of studio desk, maybe we clean that up for Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It'll give us some more direction now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks everyone.
Yep. See you Wednesday.
Okay.
Thank you.